for those of you that don't know me, as I said, I'm Bondilyn Jolly, and I have over 22 years in running marketing agencies where I have worked with top brokerages, franchise organizations, and technology companies on all kinds of business growth initiatives. I've spent about the last 15 years working around franchise development, recruitment and retention, mergers and acquisitions, and referral and relocation. And over the course of my past 15 years, I've got to meet a ton of really, really wonderful professionals. And one of those professionals is joining me today. Our panelist today has 45 years serving the real estate industry. I think he's done it and seen it all. He's assisted many of the nation's largest brokerages with recruitment and retention, and has recruited thousands of agents over the years for companies such as Remax, Coldwell Banker, C21, ERA, Home Services, and others. He is highly recognized for his attention to detail, his communication skills, and his ethical approach to every step of the recruiting process. He has built and led award-winning teams in Illinois and Indiana, as well as oversaw business operations across 17 state regions with thousands of agents underneath him. He is an expert at creating direct impact for brokers and agents in terms of growth and profitability. And I am so pleased to also be able to say he is not just my colleague, but also my friend. Pat, where are you? Turn on your camera and come join us. Hello, hello. Welcome,
Good
Pat
afternoon.
McFarland. So we've got people from all over the place, Pat. Florida, Washington, Missouri, Houston, you name it. They're dialing in from every time zone. And you know, we actually had a record number of registrations for today's topic. So I'm really, really excited to have you here and tap into that brain of yours.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here too. I'm hoping that I can share, and I always like to, it's always a great idea to do these things because I learn too. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. So everyone, like I mentioned, as we're going through our conversation today, if you have specific questions that for Pat or for myself, go ahead, put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. Pat, I might interrupt our conversation, with some of these questions as they pop in. I will also set aside some time at the end, to discuss some of these as well. But Pat, I recently led another recruitment webinar for the Wave Group. And what we focused on in that webinar was really around the marketing to your prospective agents and how to sort of initiate a meaningful conversation with them. And today's topic is sort of that continuation, right? So we've been engaging and marketing, to our top prospects. And now that top prospect that's in our wish list has raised their hand. They are ready to have a meeting with us. And we go, oh no, what happens next? How do I really create a really successful first meeting, that first impression, and what does that look like? And nobody better than you to help us address that, because you have had thousands and thousands of first meetings with prospective agents over the years.
Yeah, I've had a lot of first meetings. I think that what you just said is really true, even though for me, it's something that, every first meeting I had that same feeling. So even though it's been 1,000+ times, maybe 2,000+ times, I still feel, how am I going to make sure that that person and I have a great experience? So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
So let's start with talking about the objective of the first meeting. Like what, from your perspective and your professional background, what are you trying to accomplish in that very first meeting with a top prospect?
Yeah, so I really have three general goals whenever I meet with anybody. The first one is to really learn about them and build a relationship, right? And then to answer their questions. But overall is to really just, maybe trickle in some value, but really have fun with it and be relaxed in myself. And that's the key for me and why I'm so successful, really, because I'm just, as we're doing now, I'm just myself.
Yeah, it's just a good old conversation, right?
That's right.
And I know that you were sharing with me as we were preparing for this meeting, just a couple of those opening questions, right? To open up sort of that dialogue in that first meeting. And You want to go ahead and share those
Sure.
with our.
So I have several that I really ask, and really, first of all, I'd tell them, I'd say, it's good to see you. I appreciate you meeting with me. And then I'd really say that the goal of today is really those two things we just said. And then I'd ask them, I'd say, okay, great. So tell me about you and your business. Tell me how did you get into the real estate business? Things like that, and I want to get them right open-ended and really talking about themselves right in the beginning so I can start to form, because the presentation that I have a lot of roads that you could go down, right? We all can. And so what I want to make sure is that I'm taking the right track, and I want to make sure I'm answering what, I'd say, what's your objective from today? What do you want to get out of this meeting? Things like that.
Yeah, I really love those open-ended questions. And I know that we're going to talk about those, I think, a little bit later. But I love, that idea that you sort of lob this open-ended question out there. People love to talk about themselves, right? It's an easy and favorite topic of many people. And so it's a really good way to make them comfortable and open up to you. And it's interesting because I think, what they start to tell you is going to tell you a lot about who they are as a person and what they're what they value as a person and a professional as well.
Right. Yeah. And I always start with maybe that family, friends, and occupation. And, you may say, it sometimes when I talk to people in the beginning, I'll say, it's this time of year, right? What are you guys doing at Halloween? Or what are you doing at Thanksgiving? What are you doing at Christmas? So I try to personalize that as well.
Yeah, and I like that. One of the things you told me outside of, just building trust and building rapport and getting to know them, you also said you want to make it fun, right? You want them to feel comfortable and relaxed and feel like they're having a good time. And I think
Right.
that that's important too, to sort of remove the the anxiety that people might feel or that nervousness with that first
Yeah.
meeting.
And I'll tell them that I'll probably make a little fun or tease a little bit during the conversation. So it's just to make sure that we both stay on track, but also remember that we're always supposed to have a little fun, right?
Yeah. And I know you and I were talking about how important it was to really set an appropriate stage, right? An appropriate environment for that first meeting. And, even though I haven't interviewed agents the way you have, I have run a lot of
Right.
interviews in terms of the companies I've been with, right? And I know, one of the things that I'm always a fan of is, presenting an agenda, right? Setting those expectations and an outline around, what the meeting is. It going to be a relaxed one-on-one in my office? What kind of information do I want you to bring? Maybe from a recruitment standpoint, you might want them to bring some of the production numbers or, some of the general topics of information so that they have an outline that they're coming in and can
Right.
operate from and feel prepared.
Yeah, so I would ask some general questions just about their history and what they've done and different things like that. But when you're asking them to bring things, I really try to get them to bring stuff that's their marketing or their brand building, their personal brand building, so I can see what they've done and how they do it. And it's again conversational about how it compares to what maybe we can provide as a company to them and help them really get to the next level. I talk about that a lot. What can we do to get you to the next level? And sometimes what I'll say during that conversation is, this may force you to do things differently because we're going to give you different eyes on it. We're going to look at your strengths, your weaknesses, and maybe we're going to see some blind spots for you. So, so I'm asking for information to really be helpful, right? So I'm not asking for information to find out what the competition's doing or anything. I'm asking so I can really, and it begins the coaching process, doesn't it? It begins the retention process, doesn't it? Right there in that first meeting. So you got to remember that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build that relationship, but the relationship is one of coaching and retention and a mutual respect for growing their business to the next level.
I love that. So you're establishing that servant leadership mentality right from that very first meeting. I'm here to be a resource to you. How can I be of service? How can I help you grow as a person and professional? I love it.
Right. And when they come in, if nothing else from the meeting, they're going to get some ideas from me and a different set of eyes on their business. So I think that if nothing else, I want to create value, right? I don't, everybody's time is so precious today. So I want to make sure they know I'm going to try and when you leave here, I want your business to be a little better, even if we shake hands at the end and don't do business, right?
Right. So that reminds, so, time is precious, right? And so when you're creating that first meeting. I'm really big on practicing active listening, making sure that we eliminate distractions. Pat, where is your favorite place to conduct an initial meeting?
Yeah, so for me, most offices I'm in, and they'll come into the office. But what we do is I've always set up, regardless of whether it's a conference room that doubles as a conference room, but I'll make it what I call the recruiting conference room. So our marketing materials will be on the wall. The different things about our company, maybe some banners, different things will be there. So although it's a conference room, my office is my office, right? But the recruiting conference room, I can go in, I can have the leave behind packets right there. In other words, if somebody just popped in, I could now do a recruiting presentation by, sure, I got them in to sit with you and bring them into that particular room. And then the other thing I do in that room is I would have the TV screen welcome them, and I'd have my packet of information doubled both in a packet to them and on the monitor. So I really do like that best. During that same time, though, when they come in, just for setting the stage here, I make sure that staff all knows they're coming in and welcomes them by name so they know who it is, and like they're, wow, they know who I am here, right? And then if there's any top producers in the building at the time, and they're, usually they'll be very helpful to me, so I appreciate that. I'll make sure they stop by or peek in the conference room and say, hey, hi, I hear you were meeting with Pat. So it also creates a welcoming atmosphere in the office, is very important as well. And so that's my favorite spot to do it.
Yeah, well, you are known for your attention to detail, and how nice that is, to walk in and have a screen that greets you, to have people that greet you. It shows how prepared you are for them. And I think that's very reflective then, right, of what their ongoing experience would be as an agent in that office too. So that's wonderful. So if the objective of the first meeting is really, to get to know each other, to begin to build that trust and rapport, and obviously, kind of understand their unique talents, and to see if they're a cultural fit, are there certain things in that first meeting that maybe you don't want to discuss, or that you sort of want to shy away from as a recruiter?
Yeah, so in the first meeting, when I talk to somebody, I really don't talk about the what our end agreement might be, right? What we're going to say is you're split, or you're the promotions, or things like that. But if I have a red flag about it, it'd be not to talk about other agents, right? Or their deals or things like that. I don't want, I'd say to them this too. I'd say, I'm going to be fair with you unfairly. And they go, I go, in other words, I'm going to talk about you and our relationship and what we do, but I'm not going to be talking about others in the office or what the program is with them, because, I treat everybody fairly, but there's certain differences in different times and space that we do different things. So, that's the biggest thing I won't talk about. If they have a challenge with something or something, I may say, okay, we'll address that, in the scope of, it could be a logistical thing, it could be a personality thing. I'm not going to try to get into defend anything, right? I'm just there to create value, and I'm there to build a relationship. If we start taking positions, it doesn't come out well.
Yeah, I
Y-
understand
So
that.
you leave your pride at the door a little bit, right?
Yeah. So, Pat, obviously we're sitting here on a Zoom, and, in the past several years, I mean, so much has moved to Zoom, post pandemic. And I know that the ideal initial meeting would be a one-on-one in your office in that conference room. But if you have to do that initial meeting on a Zoom, like what we're doing today, do you take any like different approaches to the way that you start the conversation, or do you pretty much treat it the same?
Yeah, I treat it fairly the same. There's a little bit of difference in the idea that I want to make sure they're comfortable and in a space. And I tell them that, um, I just as you did at the beginning of this, let's put our phones aside. Let's, make sure things are that we're in a space that where we're just talking. I know that maybe you're at home or something, or wherever they're taking the call. And then really what I try to do, I don't know if you're asking me this about the logistics of the Zoom and how I sort of maintain it. You and I are having a conversation, and I'm paying attention. Hopefully, I don't think I think I'm looking at you today, but you want to make sure that you don't get distracted by the things around you, the noises or people around you. So you want to make sure you do that. And the other thing I do when I'm showing something to share on the screen, because obviously I can't do that physical packet, but I will send them that physical packet because I think that leave behind piece is very important in paper, in their hand. You know, maybe I'm old school, right? But I think that having something that they can go refer to, whether it be a brochure or whatever, a sample of the market materials, the agenda that what we covered, right? I'm a little more particular to set up the stage because when they're there, I can see if they open up their notebook and start taking notes. I go, listen, so I'm going to make sure, do you got a pen, paper, things just to make sure that the table is set right. And I never show the screen when I'm talking about something. I tried to, because I know the slide deck, right? I know the recruiting presentation, or I should, right? And so I try to just have it like this. I don't get into, having if we were to share now, our screen would go off to the side, and now I'm focused in on the presentation that's being presented. I prefer to have this kind of conversation with somebody. And I told you, I think that we talked about this, and you see me doing it now, the hands, or I've picked up a pen or something like that, or things like that. It's important that you don't become just this on the screen, be animated quite a bit because it helps.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, it I think keeps that engagement going, right? So you're not
Right.
like sitting and lounging back and being very
Yeah.
still. So
Yeah.
I think
Pretend
you
you're in
said move
person with
more.
them, right? Right.
That's wonderful. So we talked a little bit about some of those opening questions and the importance of having an open-ended conversation, right? And I'm always about talk less and listen more. Because I think that when you're having this initial meeting, there's no right or wrong answers to any of the questions, for people to respond to. It's really about what kind of like insight am I gaining into this prospects, their experience, their market knowledge, their communication skills, their cultural fit, and their interests in things like that. And I know you and I yesterday were talking about just some of our favorite questions that we like to ask. And I know you've given a few of those. I have a big old list of them here, Pat, but do you have any others that you kind of recommend as really good questions that are some of your favorite that you return to again and again?
Yeah. So I just ask them about where their business comes from, I was thinking, so we had that conversation. Then I was thinking about it yesterday. I took some notes of questions I wanted to really talk about. And so I like, what do they do in marketing? What do they do in training? What do they do for coaching? What are they doing for lead generation? So you can ask a lot of good questions framing around that. And so, but it gives you that insight that we're looking for. So, tell me, a little bit more about that. So, what do you pay for yourself now? That's a great question, I think, because that leads to the other four that I just mentioned. And what are you using for like technology today? Are you using a database? Most of us, if you're producing, are using, but who are you using? What are you using? Because then I can create value around what their costs are and what value I bring, right? Things like that. And then are you using transaction management? Who's doing that? Is the office doing that for you now? Are you paying the office? Are you paying an outside assistant? And then how does that compare to my company and what I provide and value? What kind of marketing team do I have? What kind of transactional management support do I have? Things like that. And the other one I thought of last night, are you happy with your owner and your manager now? That could give you great insight to whether they're going to be happy with you and you're as an owner or manager now. And so you want to know what's going on there. And really one of the things you know, I wrote down was to really let them finish. These are good questions, but we have a tendency to go, what we do, we provide this, and then you start doing that product, and you really don't need to, as you said about and we all know this, right? The more the other person comes up with their own answer, it's better, if they say it, they believe it. If we say it, they doubt it, kind of an attitude, right? And so if we can get that, but so, I always have down, I wrote it in big bold letters, even for this, wait for their response, let them finish, right? If you'll do it's very hard for me, you know me a long time, in there. So it's very, but I actively listen, and that's a term that if you go, okay, today, it's almost like, okay, active listening on, because we all like to talk, right? We're in sales. So what if you do that and just do a pregnant pause or a momentary, that extra long to you, but it's not, you'll be amazed at the amount of additional so if somebody's got to pick up that conversation, all of a sudden they come up with more, and just asking the question, what else? Or can you share a little bit more about that? And then when they're done, I like the idea of saying, well, thanks for sharing that with me, Bondilyn. I really appreciate that. May I tell you what we do here that might help you in growing your business and getting it to the next level?
That's fantastic. I love
Yeah.
those. And I know a couple of other questions you and I were discussing yesterday. One of my questions is, what are your 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year goals? You
Right.
flipped the switch on me. So I want you to talk to everybody about that a little bit.
Yeah, so really when I talk to people about their goals, I always start out, what's your 5-year goal? And then they tell me, and then I go, okay, so tell me what your 3-year goal is. And it sounds real similar, right? And then I ask them what their 1-year goal is, and then it's even more similar. So really what people are telling me so we really need to work on building those 3 and 5-year goals, because this is really your 1-year goal, isn't it? And
Okay.
so do you think we can accomplish that? And so they really, goal setting is something that I've done a lot of and do with people on an annual basis. As a matter of fact, October 15th is when I would start it with my agents. And so we'd start building the next year. And so I always try to build the 5-year, what their answer, you'll learn about the person. Are they goal setting people? Do they have a 5-year plan? Some people really do. And then do they have that backwards? It just tells me a little bit more about them.
Yeah. And how do you put them on a proper path to reach, maybe if they have a pretty large goal, right? Like, how do we work backwards and actually put them on a successful path, of
Right.
accountability that's going to
Yeah.
get them?
Sort of begin with the end in mind instead of starting out with the other way. Right.
Yeah. Another one of my favorite questions, and this is one that I ask a lot when I'm interviewing people is, what does success look like in your first 30 days working here? And I think it's just so incredibly insightful, and they start to tell you, okay, what success means to them, what they expect from their onboarding experience, what they expect from their engagement with you or with other staff in the organization. And I think that that's really telling as well.
Yeah, it also tells you whether or not you're going to deal with somebody that you can't, I said this, I think, to people a lot. I say, what I want to do is under promise and over deliver, right, to that person. But really, you can decide from that question, are their expectations so high that you're not going to be able to do that? And do you need to correct that now and say, listen, those are great goals, but let's, that's going to take us, we better put you on a 60-day plan then.
I
Yeah.
also like the question, what makes you feel valued at work or undervalued? And, this was interesting, Pat, because
Yeah.
we're at, I was interviewing some Gen Zers, this last year for a role. And I'll tell you what, when you ask them what makes them feel valued, these are people that grew up in a social media environment. And they were like, I need a lot of positive affirmation. I need to be told I'm doing good. And that was really, insightful for me because, it was this very, very different mindset. And I'm like, okay, I need to make sure, because a lot of times, we can sort of take, people being productive and doing their jobs, kind of for granted. And it made me really understand that I needed to step back and take time to extend appreciation in a public way, for some of these different generations.
Yeah, I think that, just by talking about an aspect of how I work in the office or you can talk about how you work in the office. I've been known to have a big candy dish on my desk. And if you come in, you got to ask, if you have a question, you can take a piece of candy, but you got to, let me answer. But also just manage by wandering around, appreciating at everybody and saying, that we're all looking at, we used to call it looking for the good finding, right? And if you had that mindset with people or talk about that during this process, they're going to go, wow, you know, just the little things. I used to do a thing where I had a sheet on everybody. And so I knew your favorite can of soda. I knew if you liked fruit. I knew your favorite restaurant. So you may have had a bad day. I can remember one of my top producers, and he was making, $1 million plus in commission a year. So he wasn't like he needed the candy bar, but it was, he loved Babe Ruth candy bars. I knew it. He was having a bad day. In my drawer, I whipped out, the king size Baby Ruth and said, yeah, I've been waiting for you to have this day. He just said, thank you, walked away. But if you can tell stories about that in the interview, I think it'll go a long way to talk about your culture and really the atmosphere you're trying to create for people. I think
I
it's
love
good.
that, and I swear, Pat, every top recruiter that I talk to says the same thing. They make personal notes about people and they do their research ahead of time, right? So
Right.
even before that person walks in for that initial meeting, they've checked him out on LinkedIn and on social media, and they have some ideas. And actually, Barbara O'Rourke, who's a recruiter for Allen Tate that I work with, she's so awesome because I have a cat that usually like pops up and makes an appearance in every single one of my Zoom calls.
Little cameo.
Yeah, I think he thinks, he hears me talking and he thinks I must be talking to him or something. But, she's one of those people, she just always pays attention to that kind of stuff. And so, like, every time I'm on a meeting with her, if the cat doesn't make an appearance, she calls him by name and like asks for this cat. And, she's just that attention to detail. Like, it's just so impressive. It's really going above and beyond. I
Yeah,
love
that's
that.
going back to what are you doing for the holidays? That'll get the family and friends and all that stuff. It doesn't matter which holiday, it does help find out a little bit about them and how they celebrate those things. Do they travel? Do they have family come to them? Do they go visit? You find out something about them that's important.
Yeah, and you get to establish that common ground, right? That commonality with each other. So everyone in the chat, I just dropped a link in there. That link is to a blog that I published this last week under Wave Group, and it starts with the top 5 questions that recruiters should ask prospective agents. But then I go in and provide you a whole list of really wonderful, like open-ended questions that really help you kind of initiate that meaningful conversation. And I know, Pat, we're going to share some takeaways tomorrow, and we're going to reiterate some of those key questions from your side as
Yeah.
well. But
I have
everybody,
one more good question for you before we move on.
yeah.
And so, why did you choose your current company, or why did you choose that current brand or whatever it might be? Why are you there? Was it the only choice? Were you newly licensed and that's where you started? Was it because, why? So it's a great question, open-ended, and it tells you a lot about where they are coming from.
Yeah. Are they there because of the commission model? Are they there because they followed somebody there? Are they there because they love the training and mentorship? So that's going to give you a lot of good insight. I love that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. So you're having this wonderful, wonderful conversation with somebody. You think it's going along great. And all of a sudden, Pat, they throw up an objection to you. What are some of the most common objections that you have dealt with, and how do you work to successfully overcome those objections?
Yeah. So I think, the one that the toughest one for me is I love my manager. I love my broker, right? You hear that one. And I just ask him, well, tell me more about that. Right. And so, because I want to know what they love about that person. And then I try to break it down and say, okay, that's good, but what about you and your family, right? What are you doing to build that for them? And usually it comes out that they do love their broker, but they're also more concerned about their family and their legacy and their building of their brand and everything like that. So that's a good one. And then really, it's a bad time. I've got a lot of closings coming up, or it's I'm too busy, or all those things. And all those things I really believe, it might be I have too much invested in building my brand with this logo, or that logo or whatever. Those kind of things. I think those are all stalls because they're sitting in the chair in front of you. So I want you to know, if that happens, you don't got to be afraid of the objection. It could be they just are testing your mettle, right? Because, they just don't want to say, in the back, there's always their view and your view, right? And they may go, that they're already signed up. So don't assume, let's assume they're already signed up with you. So there's things that you can do on the, I'm too busy. Okay, well, let's talk about that. What do you mean? How many of this? How many of that? What's that look like? And say, so if I could develop a plan of transition that would help your business not slow down and give you an opportunity to grow your business in the long run, would that be something you would consider? And I got Bondilyn shaking her head.
Yeah,
See,
I
that's
like
what my
that.
goal is.
See,
So
because
that's my goal.
then
Yeah, yeah.
you're putting them on the spot a little bit there, right, Pat?
Yeah.
But
So, yeah, but it's a trial close or whatever. But you want to know, is this really an objection or is it something you can move on from? Sometimes that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it's just something that you can shelf and go, okay, we can address that. It's not a problem that you're too busy. Matter of fact, I wouldn't be talking to you unless you were busy.
yeah, and there's
You
a
know?
reason that they're sitting across the table from you or on that Zoom meeting with you in the first place. So you really need to kind of dig under
Right.
that. So I'm going to throw a couple more common objections at you,
Okay.
Pat. I'm really happy at my current office.
That's great. I want you to be happy, but I want to know if I could make you a little happier, right? The idea of talking today is really to find out whether or not we can increase and grow your business. And let me ask you a question. Are you spending enough time with your family? How's your life work balance right now? You say you're happy, but I want to dig a little deeper into that, right? And find out whether or not you're happy with the broker, but you're working 24/7. And if that's the case, then let's find work-life balance and let's see if I can help you really find a way to enjoy the life that you've built. Let's make the good life. Let's have the good life now. You worked hard. Let's make you have the good life now.
Pat, you are like such a closer. I swear to God. All right, I've got a couple more for you, but hey, everybody that's
I don't
watching,
even know I'm closing as you saying it.
well,
I'm
I'm
just
like
having a
signing up. I am
conversation.
signing up today. No, but so I'm going to throw a couple more at you, but everybody that's watching, if you have an objection that maybe you run into a lot and you're really trying to formulate what is the appropriate response, go ahead, put that in the chat or put that in the questions for me, and we'll throw it at Pat. We'll see how he responds. But Pat,
No
I've got
problem.
one for you. Another one. This is a pretty common one too. So I am a top producer at my current office, Pat, and I know we've got a couple other top producers in your office. I mean, how are you going to be able to support me as a top producer? And what is that relationship going to look like between me and these other top producers? Because, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for sharing that with me, and I appreciate it. I'll tell you what, one of the things we do here is we really try to elevate everybody. So the collaboration and the teamwork, when you have a challenge, I'm going to try and help you with it. But I got news. We're all better together, right? We all climb, you don't climb Everest alone, right? And so I really think that you being around other top producing people that are willing to collaborate with other people in the office is going to help you grow. Don't you?
How can you say no, right?
Right. And so one of the other things I said earlier to you was I'm going to be fair unfairly. So I'm going to make sure that you get all your everything that you need within your business and growing your business, but we're going to really separate it out that's your brand and your business. So we're really flying your flag and the company flag right together. And so it's 50-50. And so when I'm talking to Bondilyn, we're going to fly her flag and the company flag. So make sure that you understand that I'm here to help you, but collectively we all raise each other up, right? More yard signs, more listings, more sales, everybody wins.
Yeah, you're getting some compliments here. Keith in the audience says you are incredibly smooth. He's signing up with you too. You got two of us now, but we've got a couple good objections that have come in from the audience
Oh,
for you.
good.
All right, so you know what, Pat? I have never had to pay a franchise fee, and I'm just not sure that I really want to start that now with your office.
Yeah, so really, you've never been paying a franchise fee in the past, but let's look at the value. So, right, I could say you were going to pay me $1 million, and if it wasn't worth that, right, it's not worth that. But if I were to tell you that your franchise fees would be covered by the 1 or 2 deals increase that you would do, and I'm going to try and increase your deals by a dozen deals, then it pays for itself, doesn't it?
It
Right?
sure does. Yeah. And one
And
thing that I like, Pat, too, and I don't know, you probably have done this. I think you used to do this with a couple of the past organizations you've recruited, is having that spreadsheet where you can literally show them a side-by-side comparison of what their
yes.
current commission and business model looks like versus what yours looks like. So really putting sort of that pen to paper,
Yeah.
to show
So
them a side-by-side comparison.
yeah, and when they talk about that, you can do the comparison, and then we put it down to dollars, right? Or to franchise fees, if you will, or whatever that cost is. And then we say, do you think our technology, our marketing, our tools, our systems, having me helping you with doctoring deals, do you think having the space, whatever those value items are, do you think, how many deals do you think more deals you'll do this year? And they give a number. And I say, well, this is like one deal. So do you think everything I'm presenting to you now would be at least worth one deal? Well, that's going to cover the franchise fee for the year.
Awesome.
So,
Oh my gosh. So many questions are coming in. I think we've opened
oh,
Pandora's box here, and these are so good though. So let's keep going. Um,
okay. I'll
so we've
try to
got
be
another,
more concise.
yeah, this
Okay.
is a good one. Okay. So change, takes time away from me doing business, right? Migrating over into your office. Why would I want to go through that? I'm sorry. Why would I want to go through all of that to not even know if I'm going to fit in or be happy in your environment? I
That's a
think it's a
great
question
question.
about the risk, right? Why would I be
Yeah.
taking that kind of risk?
Yeah. So really, I think that that's a great question because, we all have to have faith, right? And you have to believe in yourself and in the change. And it's going to force you to do some things differently and really build your business. So the question really is, do you have faith in yourself and the growth? Are you capped where you are now, do you think? And if you are, do you that's why one of the great reasons to start with us is to get to the next level. Now, I can never mitigate all the risk, but I can tell you that the staff, the tools, the systems, and the strategic systems I have put in place to make that a seamless transition for you are going to minimize any of that risk. And so you're going to have to take that leap of faith at some point, just like you did when you got into the real estate business. But I'm here to tell you that if we do get together on this, I'm going to make sure that I minimize the risk, but I can't guarantee all the risk. But I can tell you this, if there's something there that's lost or something, we might have a program here that will cover that. So say you have to pay a fee to your other broker to close some deals or something. But my goal really with you and what my commitment is, and really my mission and my mandate is really to make sure that your business does not slow down during transition, that we build a plan, we execute that plan, and when we flip on the switch, it's like a brand new day and everything just keeps going.
Wow. Awesome response. One last one for you. Are you
Okay.
sweating yet? You're just bring it on.
Yeah, very
And you've
I
got,
get the
and Brooks and Doug and Maggie, we're going to address all of your questions too. Don't worry. Last objection there, and then we've got to move on. You know what, Pat, I met with you today because I was just really curious to see, what you guys were doing. I've heard a lot of really good things, but honestly, I don't think it is the right time for me.
it's just a bad time. Otherwise, you think that this would be good. If what would make it the right time for you?
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know, but if you did know, could you tell me a couple of things that would have to change in order for it to be the right time?
Yeah. So I like how you keep just turning it back around on me, right? You're
Right,
forcing
right,
me to
right,
elaborate. You're
right,
forcing me to give you more of a response than my little shallow, it's not time, right?
right. Right. Well, I would even go deeper. I go, is it the company side or the fan? Which side is it? What's going on? Let me try and help you.
Yeah, because
Because if it's it,
there's something else
but let me
happening
ask you
there,
another
right?
question. If it's not, if it was the right time and everything was aligned on the timing side, do you think this is a great opportunity for you?
And
Yeah.
hopefully they're
So,
gonna say yes, right?
yeah. Well, but then it might uncover the real objection too.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know, one note that I made in our prep call, you said to me, like you think about the preparation that an agent does to do a really good listing presentation. And you, as the recruiter, you said you have to have basically that good selling presentation, right? So you have to kind of anticipate the questions and the concerns that might come up and have those, prepared responses to them. And you obviously have a prepared response for every single thing we've thrown at you so far.
Well, I think that's just experience too, but if not, there's a script or tip or question out there that you can really formulate.
So let's jump into some red flags, because I am sure that you have probably seen and heard it all over your years. What are some of the red flags, maybe that, the broker that like you from the recruiting side, are paying attention to, and or vice versa, maybe some red flags that the agent should be thoughtful around as well?
Yeah, so as a broker, I'm always we only have one chance to make a first impression, and probably whatever that person comes in as, what they're carrying, I've had people come in with several bags and their coffee and their drink, and they got to take 10 minutes to get organized at the desk. And I'm going, huh, interesting. Or they come in and they're dressed, overdressed. I think, it's not normal, right? They're overdressed, so they're trying to compensate for something anyway. I don't know sometimes, and then there's people that just come in like under. I've had people come in shorts, and I'm like, okay, we can meet, but really, I don't even, people don't come into shorts here. But if you're in certain markets, that's very common. But I'm in the Midwest where it's 53 today. So if you came in shorts today, it's a red flag. Just so overdressed, underdressed. I think one of the other things is just, hygiene and different things. I mean, I've actually had people come in where I was waiting for that hour to end because
Oh,
it was just not pleasant. But other things that I think are very important is eye contact, just their attention. I've had people do this during the whole meeting, never look at me once. And so it's just something that, I try to get over that because it could be for a reason, right? So I'm very open to a lot of possibilities. But at some point, I don't know how I'm going to help that person if I can't help you get to the next level, why would I want to recruit you either, right? And so, but then the biggest red flag that I look for is I've had people come in with alcohol on their breath, and it's just not the environment, that if that's happening on an interview, I wouldn't want my company or my other agents to have to cover that, right, with the seller, with the buyer, co-op deals, all that. And I know that it could be perfectly fine, but for me, that's a red flag, right?
I think those are all red flags, like you think about how that person is coming in and presenting themselves to you, right? And you have to think that that would cross over and reflect at how they present themselves when they're out with their buyers and sellers. And that's
Yeah,
something you have to be really thoughtful of, because they're not just representing themselves, they're representing your organization.
right. Swearing, right? I mean, I have people that, I mean, every other word, I'm like, you
Yeah.
know, uh, it's, and I've had, it's there's a progress to that, I think, with, I'm an old guy, so younger generations, right, where it's more common, but at some point it's not initially anyway, right? But at some point, I think the language isn't, it's a little more lax than it was in my day, right? So it's
Yeah.
okay, but there's a time and a place for everything, and that's not the time or place, right? I think I made this comment to you yesterday. I'm at first you ask him to dance, then you ask him on a date, then you marry him. And if people come in and they're acting like we're already married, that's a red flag for me.
And one of my red flags that I mentioned to you, and of course you had a way to overcome that, but one of my red flags I see is if I see somebody who has jumped around, like, they've only spent 6 months, a year, and they're kind of constantly in motion and hopping around different brokerages or different jobs, that's a red flag to me. And how did you respond to that?
Yeah, I
Yes,
don't remember, but I'm going to respond now. I really am open to that conversation because there's a lot of change that can happen. It could be personality conflicts with somebody in the office. It could be that they got the training there, that they were overpromised something at another location. They way under delivered, right? They were sold something that they weren't in for, or what. So I want to hear the story before I determine whether or not that's a red flag for me. And you'll know right away, right? Because they'll start complaining about the broker, they'll complain about the agents, they'll complain about the yeah. And so guess what they're going to do where when you get them in your office, they're going to complain about whatever it is. But if they have legitimate reasons, I mean, that life is, we're always changing for different reasons. So
yeah, I liked, your response to me, that said to me, okay, you're not passing judgment, right?
right.
You don't have a preconceived judgment in your head about that. You're like, hey, I noticed this. Why is this? Let's uncover the reasons behind this. And I
Yeah, and
just
I think I said, that's when you hit them right between the nose with, you don't sugarcoat it anything. You say, that's the elephant in the room. Let's address it so we can move on, you know.
I love that. We have lots of questions coming in for you, but I kind of want to kind of wrap this part of the conversation up. So, you've had this meeting with the person, you've had a really open dialogue, you may or may not have overcome some objections, some different red flags with them. And now it's like coming to the end of that meeting. So I've got two different scenarios here for you, Pat. The first scenario is this is what we're all hoping for. It was a great meeting. You really love this candidate. You think that they really love you. What is next? Like, how do you conclude that meeting and what are your next steps with that candidate?
Yeah, so it's like what we've been talking about all day. I want to know the answers, or anticipate what I know what the next steps are for me, but I always say, well, what do you think the next step should be in our process? I want to see what they have to say. They may say, well, I want to see it in writing, or, I want to whatever. And then I'll say, okay, here's what I'd like to do. Let's and there's even a point, if it's the right candidate, the right time, I'll stick my hand out and say, okay, welcome aboard. We'll get this, pending further, approval of you by this in writing and everything, we'll get it done, right? And you agree, and we'll get it, shake the head and shake hands. I think that commitment is a big deal, right? If they'll shake your hand on it, that, I think we're people of our words, basically. And that's that commitment, mental commitment, although it's not a signed commitment, really makes it a lot smoother too. It's very assumptive kind of closing. I'd say, okay, when would you like to start? Think assumptive closes though at that point. I'm excited to have you, or, welcome, or whatever you want to say.
So I like that. Assumptive closes, ask them what their expectation for the next steps are. That's wonderful. Okay, so let's do this. The candidate is not a good fit, Pat. You do not want to move forward with this candidate, regardless of how they feel. How do you handle and gracefully exit and move forward?
Yeah, so I was just as you just said that, I'm realizing that I go about 8 to 1 too. So I do a lot of interviewing before, you know what I mean? There's different reasons on both sides, but it's, you could have this interview and really go, oh, I don't think so. So I go, I'll tell you what. So I appreciate you coming in today. I've had a wonderful time. I hope you enjoyed it, learned some about us and our company. Let me do this. I'm going to review everything that we talked about today. Hopefully what I've done during the conversation and what they've done is I'll just have a legal pad in front of me and I'll take notes, and I will sincerely take the good, the bad, the ugly notes on my pad. So, I mean, it's just comments of things. And so then I'll say, I want to review everything. I'm going to talk to some people here in the office. And then what I'll do is I promise I'll get back to you by early next week or by the end of the week. It depends on when, but 2 or 3 days later, because I really do want to think about it too and think, is this something I can overcome, or is it something I want to, hit you between the face with and say, listen, on that first interview, you said this and it really was a problem. Is that really true? And so I say, let's follow up in 2 or 3 days and I'll let you know.
Awesome. And Pat,
So you're more awarding the opportunity than just saying, well, I'm on board. No, wait, I got to say yes too, you know?
Yeah, and I like that even though they're not the right candidate, you still want to have that professional relationship and
Sure.
professional rapport with them, regardless, because maybe whatever that red flag was for you, it might be something that they are able to overcome, or that you could work with them to overcome, and they might become that perfect candidate at a later
And if
time.
not, I would wish them well in a follow-up and say, see you at the next closing, but we've just decided that, you're not a fit for us. I tell them straight up too, you're not, so there's no, can I come back in 30, whatever it is, let them move on too. Right.
That's wonderful. Great advice. So we've got a lot of different questions for you that have been coming in. And, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and I meant to bring this up yesterday. So, you've been doing this for 45 years, and,
Yes,
the
I was a baby.
and I wasn't even born yet.
Yeah.
No, I was.
18. I started at 18.
Wow, Pat. So, over the course of that time, I mean, technology has come into play, right? The computer, CRMs, social media, all of these things, I'm just kind of curious, like, how have you evolved, with sort of the emergence of technology, and what do you leverage to sort of assist you in your recruiting efforts? And then what are some of the things that honestly just never change, in the past 45 years you've been doing it?
Yeah, so really I leverage there's several tools and softwares out there that you can spend, X amount of dollars a month on, but it gives you everything. It'll tell me when somebody's had a top listing sell, when they did a closing. I would call people all the time and say, you know what, it's a beautiful sunny day and I just saw your sale come across. Holy cow, that's great. I can't believe you just sold $1 million property. And you hit it on a double, you did the listing side and the selling side. I couldn't let that go today. I just wanted to say congrats and I hope you have a beautiful day. That's all part of the getting to the thing. So I use that technology. There's a great integrated with the MLS where you can do that. And I follow that, but it also gives you an opportunity to send out, constant contacts kind of thing. But I think one of the things that hasn't changed for me is I send handwritten notes. I always send a handwritten note, right? Thanking, like, even if I'm not going to bring you on board, I wish you well. And, we used to have notes set up, accessories. There's a ton of notes out there, but I use those and I write a handwritten note on every co-op. And so they know who I was, or they'd hear about because I would see people later and they'd bring in the note and say, I still have it. So I think those are still important, although the email and the texting and, that's one of the things I've really evolved to is people answer your text more than they will your email, right? So there's a lot of texting I'll do to say congrats and stuff now. So that kind of stuff. I think that's where we're at. And the websites and the tools, I always, just what you said earlier, I do my homework. So I want to see your website and compliment them if it's a good one. I want to see your social media, tell you a lot about that too, right? So there's a lot of just other homework on the technology side you can do.
Yeah, and one of your questions was, what are you using for agent production stats, or do you ask the agent to produce that for you?
No, I know it, but I always verify. And so there's it's just a software technology. I don't know if, maybe Wave Group has something. I don't know. Do you guys have stuff that would do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever possible, we'll pull MLS data, and depending
Right.
on the MLS, it'll have, like GCI, right? It'll
Right.
have production numbers. Not all of the MLSs do that.
Right.
And then there's some other resources that we can tap
Right.
into.
Just
And a
have you.
lot of,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
data is always king, right? But a
Yeah.
lot of times, I might have to hit like 2 or 3 different data sources and compile
But
it in.
ask me the second part of that again.
Um, oh, well, I had asked you what never changes for you
Yeah.
over the past 45 years. What is a tried and true recruitment practice that you have been doing for 45 years?
Yeah, so the notes really come into play, and then really just being myself and being genuine, right? When you call somebody with that call I was talking about, I really mean it. I mean, it's really good for them and their family, and they just, that's a good deal in any market, right? You're doing $1 million deal. It doesn't matter if the market's average price is $1 million. When you do that, those are good deals, right? So just being present. The other thing I think that we talked about that we haven't discussed today is that we're talking about all this stuff like it all just happens. Have a recruiting mindset and blocking out the time to do the recruiting every day, 5 days a week, and making the calls. I think I said to you when we were doing the prep that I make, and I just said it nonchalantly too, well, I make 25 calls a day. Well, not everybody will answer, but you can I don't always leave a message. It depends on the person. And then, sometimes you gotta, Pat, what did you want? I was just calling to check in, but the ones that you do connect with, and then at the end of the week, if you just connect with 5, you talk to 25 people that you didn't talk to before. So blocking out the time, and I talked about 8:30 to 10:30 in the morning, or late in the day, 4:30 to 6:30. It depends on the market. Sometimes when agents will pick up, figure it out what it is in your market, because I've been in DC and picked up, that's 6:30 at night. And in Chicago, it's 8:30 to 10:30, or Northwest Indiana. It depends on where I'm at. But 8:30 to 10:30 in the morning, a lot of agents will pick up because they're not as busy, and they'll take your call and they'll spend a little time. I've had people on the phone for 20 minutes at that hour.
Wow.
So
Yeah, find that sweet spot in the time, right? So
right.
we're at the top of the hour. We do have some more questions here. So I'm just gonna, if everybody doesn't mind, if we can just run a few minutes over, we're gonna go ahead and keep trying to address your questions. So just if you have to drop off, don't worry, you'll get a recording of this. But if you're able to stay, let's just run a few minutes over, Pat, if you are available.
I can do it. I'm glad to do it. It's been fun. Where did it go?
Yeah. So Doug asked the question, what is your dialogue like to get the appointment? So say that maybe you had sent out some emails, inviting people for a meeting, somebody responds back, like, what does your dialogue look like to get them into that chair across the table from you?
Yeah, so I just usually talk about, could we meet initially for 20 to 30 minutes? So I can do it, so I hone it into where I'm not taking too much time, but I always leave an hour in my block. So in case we do run, just as we're doing today, if they're interested and I'm interested, I don't want to have less time. So, but what I ask them is, would you be open to a conversation where I might be able to share some ideas with you? And I say, listen, I just want to share some ideas, but I can promise you this, at the end of our conversation, you'll walk away with a couple of good ideas for you and your business. So I want to make sure that I add value to every conversation, and that, with whether you're a new manager or an experienced manager, if you look at what they're doing and ask the right questions, you can give them some good ideas to elevate their business just by looking at their information. And looking at that, we look at the good stuff, we look at, we can see the bad habits, the good habits, and maybe a blind spot that they don't see. They went, wow, I never thought of that. So you create value for that 30 minutes, I think, is very important.
I love that. That just goes back to your belief in servant leadership, right? That we mentioned early on. Just how can you be that resource there for them?
But the dialogues, I think you're going to send out some questions and things. And really, I'd recommend going back to your previous webinar on that one, because I'll bet you it's all there. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. And so I actually, when I send the follow-up email tomorrow, everybody, I'll include a link to that initial.
Oh, good.
It's actually the next question, it was actually something that we did address in our past webinar. What are your thoughts on advertising that you're looking to add agents to your office? So do you actively advertise when you're welcoming agents into the office?
I do. Yes. Yeah. So I don't know which kind of advertising, but everything I did, right? So social, that's what I said. I'm the managing broker, right? I've had 125, 140 agents, and I let them all know that that's my role, is say in the sales, right? They sell the buyers, the listings and the sales. And my job is to recruit agents and grow the company. So I let everybody know, from in-house to out-house. So in social media, on emails, everything would be tagged. Everything's in a recruiting event. If I have a training, I invite people. Very, very much a recruiter all the time.
Yeah, and that's good, because so that brings up another question. I know a lot of brokerages will look at, Q4 into early Q1 as sort of that prime recruitment time of the year. But you were sharing with me that you tend, you're recruiting all year long, and you actually see, people making that move at different times of the year. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so really in August, it's interesting. It's like summer's over, and so kids get back to school. Think about that. And really, it's a perfect time because there's a little lull if you're active with kids and family and everything. They would transition in September, October. I do a lot of recruiting then. And then again in the spring. In other words, the winter months, they don't want to, I guess we all hibernate in the Midwest. Maybe it's a Midwest thing. But what happens is then in February, March, April, before in April, when the spring really market opens up. So just as there's a commonality or there's a wave in the business cycle, that's also this one to look at. And you can look at trends in your MLS to find out when that is. And if there's a little bit of lull, that's when you should really be making those recruits come. Although end of the year is not, it's a good idea, but a lot of times they're busy and they're taking some time off and, for holidays or whatever, they're traveling, whatever that might be. So it's not always the best time, that February, March, or that, September, October. I found a lot of good recruits.
Wonderful. So, Pat, we ran a few minutes over. I know that everybody appreciates it, though. Thank you all so much for all of your questions for Pat. Pat, just, in conclusion, what is some advice that you have? We've got these recruiters out here. What do you want everybody to walk away knowing today?
Yeah, so I think what we've been talking about is tools and systems. And so I create I talked about several of them, right? I create that recruiting conference room. I create a leave behind packet that I make 25 of them up immediately. So when they're running low, staff knows to replenish those. So I can do a recruiting presentation anytime. I think that you're building connections. Always just try to connect with people. You don't like I'm talking about a phone call where I go, that's an awesome sale. I can't believe you did 4 deals this week. You closed 4 deals. You buying lunch, whatever, so I'm having a little fun with them, but I'm really just trying to build connections. And we know that works, right? So when the time comes, maybe they'll think of me, or we'll at least have a good relationship, in the long run. So those are things that I really focus on, and blocking the time and scheduling. Don't just it's hard, right? Anything worth doing is hard, right? You got to earn it. So you got to block and schedule the time. And if you'll do that, and everybody starts to get used to it around you, that you're blocking and scheduling the time for recruiting, they know, and they almost embrace it. They go, your door's closed in your office. They know that's not the time to come in and ask a question because you're on the phone with somebody.
That's
Or
fantastic.
doing
So
your job. You're doing your job. I'm doing my job now. Am I bothering you when you're doing
yeah,
So,
eliminate those distractions, right? Close that
right.
door. That's wonderful. Well, Pat, thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody, thank you. A couple quick final poll questions we're going to put up. So Jason, if you could go ahead and trigger those. The first is, if you would like to schedule an exploratory conversation to learn about the recruiting services at Wave Group, you can go ahead and select it. Jason, did you pop that up? Is he
Not
there?
there yet.
Or you can put it in the chat. And that also, we have a monthly recruitment email newsletter.
It's in the exit poll when they.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, yeah. So just fill that out. We've got a recruitment newsletter, and we send out all kinds of great tips from fabulous recruiters such as Pat. Pat, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Yep.
You just dumped so much information on us today. It was wonderful.
Well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate being on here. I hope it was helpful, and I thank you all, and I'll see you next time. How about that?
All right.
Whenever that
Bye,
is.
everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Happy recruiting.